I'm Aoife Barry. I'm assistant news editor with thejournal.ie, and I'm joined by Grainne Humphreys, who is a festival director of the Virgin Media Dublin International Film Festival. Grainne, it's so great to have you here.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. It's yay. Part of the whole festival experience is starting. Hooray.
Hooray, exactly. And you're running from the 23rd of February till the 6th of March, isn't it, this year?
Yeah.
We'll find out more about later on in the chat, I suppose, about what people can expect in terms of like the highlights, because I know you'll have a few things you want to mention if the things aren't sold out already, because there's plenty of things are selling out, which is just amazing and brilliant. But I just kind of wanted to start, not to get too pandemic on the whole thing, but when I think of when everything kicked off in 2020, the very last cultural thing that I did before the world went insane was go to the Virgin Media Dublin International Film Festival, and it was such good crack, and I kind of feel very glad it was the last thing that I did. But for you finished that festival in 2020 in March, and literally like a week later, a few days later, Ireland was in lockdown. So what happened then? Did you go straight into a meeting? Did you even know what to do about this strange occurrence, knowing that you had to start planning next year's festival probably pretty quickly?
Well, it's really strange, and it's so lovely actually, because it really does feel for so many people that this was the last cultural event that they went to in 2020. And I don't mean just Irish people. A lot of our guests keep telling me, oh, the last festival I was at was actually Dublin, and the last time I actually had a drink with a group of professionals was actually, after the screening of Herself. I mean, it's bizarre,
Wow. Yeah.
But it was 8 days later. Yeah, everything went into the lockdown. So we actually hadn't finished packing up, to be quite honest. I mean, we still had that weird thing of boxes in different places, and we were all told to go home. So after a festival, there's a really strange kind of calm. It's a bit eerie. It's a bit like walking around a ballroom or a party after everything's gone home, And we did allow ourselves to do that, to kind of take that breath. Like everybody else, we were forced to by being at home. But the bit that I suppose was fascinating from my point of view is that the festivals that happened quite quickly after us pivoted to online. So, very quickly, I think there was one in Copenhagen that went nearly entirely online in the middle of March. And from then on, that was the big issue, if you like, facing film festivals and exhibition, was around, do you go online? Do you hold out for physical? When would physical come back? And would theatrical be like it had been before? And like everybody else, we had a summer of, who's going to save it? When's the Bond film coming? Is it not coming? Is it coming back again? Warner Brothers bravely going out with a couple of films to try, with Tenet and Wonder Woman, trying to kind of keep that kind of energy. So, what I did and what my colleagues did is basically we started researching. We went to find out how you did a film festival in a different way than we had done for the last 18 years. Wow. So we did lots of research. There's a really lovely gang of people in Ireland who work in the different film festivals, and we kind of came together and pooled our resources. And so everybody was building this kind of mine of information about how you did it, the windows that people could offer audiences on films, what were the kind of numbers that you would expect, how do you promote something when it's not attached to a physical site. And then the one that is a bit more tricky is filmmakers, and for them trying to talk them through the process of moving a festival from a physical screening where you bring them on stage, they wave, say a few words and go, and then they come back at the end and either everybody's gone or some people are there, or there's a standing ovation, or there's awards, there's reviews, people like yourself interview them. It's a dynamic. And then suddenly it's all, as we all know, this weird virtual version, and that's what happened to us last year. So we had a plan to do drive-ins and outdoor, and we were going to have a small online element, and then suddenly the whole thing went online. And that was learning, to find out that audiences across Ireland were able to join us through our VMDIFF platform. And we learned loads, you do genuinely learn loads. But I think, I found it a very surreal experience. I would find myself kind of watching a screening of something I'd seen before and wondering what people were thinking, as opposed to that bit where you stand by the side and you can hear them laughing in the right place or the wrong place, and I think that's the side that I'm really looking forward to, is the fact that cinema is, I always think of it as an art form that has, these artists, and then the audience kind of completes the process, and you actually you share this experience the big white screen at one end of a room and the rest of you, you know, kind of engaging with it. And so that part was the bit that I missed, even though I thought it was great. We had loads of numbers and lots of people joined us who'd never joined us before. It felt, for me, it was very definitely a very different experience that was learning and interesting, but not necessarily to be repeated in the same way. Do you know what I mean, for 2022?
Yeah, and that idea of, like, I keep thinking about kind of working from home. There's a kind of parallel there where employers might have said, oh, there's no way we can actually allow people work from home or do a hybrid model, and then we were all forced into it, and you learn through that what actually is possible. So that meant when it came to 2022, presumably you were planning all the time for some sort of a hybrid where you're like, we want bodies in the cinema, but we also have to kind of plan for it not happening. So things also were changing really, really quickly, weren't they, up till only a month or two ago? So how did you cope with that, getting forward to kind of coming to now, to 2022?
I mean, I think there's a couple of things, and I've spoken to some of my programmer friends about this, but anyone who works in festivals, you start with kind of a blank page on one level, you know, because you're kind of dependent on the artists to create, do you know what I mean? And then you place a kind of structure around it. But also it is about tap dancing and improvising. So in a way, you know, there's a sense where you're able to kind of respond to changes. But you're right. I mean, it was around early December that there was very definitely rising numbers, and there was a lot of things going into lockdown. And that's when it started to look really, you know, difficult to design a fully physical event, you know, and it was really the team kind of saying, well, look, you know, we really want to do this. There's also a symbolism. The festival happens at the very start of the year, you know, for a lot of filmmakers and for audiences, they really look forward to the fact that there's a kind of starting point, you know, and there's an opportunity to see the best and new work that's coming out. So we did kind of drill into how to do that. So we do have, interestingly, we have nearly, I'd say about 45% of the program is available online as well. And that will happen after the physical screening. So that's kind of the way that we try to kind of moderate it, if you like. The window will be the same. The capacities will still be the same. So there will be availability for nearly 400 people for the online. But from my point of view, what's really exciting is that in December, we were basing everything on 50%. And that just seemed a very lonely way to do it, but the way that we were going to do it. So when the figures changed to allow us to have 100% capacity, like you said, the films that we're delighted are selling well, we knew would be seen by 50% more people, you know, because in my head, you know, I've been, and I'm sure you have too, at those screenings where you don't have full audiences. And there's something slightly, you know, kind of less shiny or less kind of warm about it when you're constantly aware of all the gaps. But when you're actually in that screening and you're surrounded by people kind of responding at the same time, it's fantastic. So we're really excited that the 100% capacity and all the rules are being obeyed. I think all the venues and the cinemas have spent a long time making sure that they can assure audiences that they will be taken care of and they'll be managed, you know, and protected. But for me, the other thing that was really funny is the filmmakers never, ever, ever thought we were doing anything except a physical. Wow. No filmmaker ever said, which is hilarious.
Yeah, it's very positive and forward thinking about it, and kind of fingers crossed, I suppose, thinking about it too, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the other thing that's interesting about it is I felt that one of the dangers about online is that it can lead you to start programming in a particular way. You can start picking certain kinds of films. And I think what's lovely about knowing that we were in cinemas is that we were allowed to you know, explore the kind of, you know, the widest spectrum that we possibly wanted to. So films that would possibly struggle with online presentation, you know, which are films that are maybe slightly slower, slightly more experimental, for instance, or maybe more niche. And, you know, we're able to show them on, you know, the beautiful cinemas that we have, you know, and be able to kind of give audiences the opportunity to see them as they should be seen, you know, because I do feel sometimes one of the things that happened with the kind of, you know, lockdown kind of culture was very definitely the ability for you to go, stop, I'll go and make some tea and I'll come back, you know.
Yeah, completely. It's like that attention span. You know, what I love about going to cinema, and especially when you go to the festival where it's kind of films that you might not know anything about at all beyond the description in the program, is you're there and you're focused. There's no phone, nothing. So that's why it's just so important to have that there. And it's 20 years of the festival this year, which is incredible. Have you had time to sit back and reflect on all that you've achieved and what you've learned over the last 20 years? And you've been in the role since 2008 as well, and particularly looking at that, like.
Um, Sometimes we do. I mean, there's been a fantastic team of people who have worked on the festival over the years, and there's also a fantastic community of Irish filmmakers whose work was screened. You know, there's many we've been showing their feature films or documentaries since the start, and then obviously there's journeys. You know, we have a discovery program, and we've lots of people who would have come in with a couple of credits and now actually have a very, very large IMDb page, you know, so that has been interesting. And I think what's shocking, like every time you mention age to anybody, is people go, really? It's that long? It only seems like yesterday. And Tara Brady has been working on a kind of oral history, and it's been really funny talking to the different people about, you know, their memories and the things that stand out, you know, and it is incredibly subjective. I mean, for some people, it's about discovering a filmmaker, you know, or accidentally bumping into one of their heroes, you know, coming out of the toilets or walking into the cinema or something. And what I think is the nicest part about this festival is it does feel very connected to the city. You know, it's a very small city. You know, you hear a lot of stories about people running from one venue to another and bumping into somebody or suddenly finding themselves in a situation simply because of proximity. So I quite enjoy that. And then the other thing about Tara's piece is really funny is that it's been lovely to kind of see how trends that you don't know that you were designing, I shouldn't say this as a programmer, but you didn't know, have kind of, you know, been kind of continued year on year, you know. So she was asking me about, you know, how come you ask all these kind of like, you know, sort of legends and divas? And I was like thinking, who was she talking about? You know, and then suddenly Claudia Cardinale came to mind, and then Julie Andrews, and then you've got Tilda Swinton, and you're kind of going, oh yeah, actually thinking about it, yes, we have done. You know, we've had a fantastic kind of roll call of talent that you kind of, as I said, in sometimes you see it in a bite size in a particular year, and it's attached to a particular film. But then when you stand back a bit and you look, you kind of go, wow. You know, there's lots and lots of really amazing people have come to the festival and shared their work, which again is only probably something you would think about from a kind of anniversary point of view. You kind of look at the guest list, if you like, over previous years, you know.
And see what you've achieved, you know. And I think for myself and for a lot of people probably watching this who are not programmers, who've never programmed a film festival, wouldn't even know where to begin. You know, where does it start? Because I would imagine there's as well, like there's levels of you're having to research, you have to have your own knowledge, you have to figure out what's happening, what's coming out, what people are talking about. Then there's probably competition, I'd imagine as well, who gets what, and then you're trying to balance it. So maybe we could start with, like, you know, where it all begins. Is it immediately after the festival ends that you start the next one, or are you constantly doing that research and kind of knowledge gathering for the next one that comes along, or even way into the future when you hear someone's working on a particular movie at a particular time?
I think it's a combination of all of those things. I mean, I think in if you were to take a one particular year, and let's take a normal year, the reality is there's going to be films that you wanted that you didn't get because they weren't finished, or there's other reasons why they don't fit into your particular kind of like timeline. So you do keep them kind of tracked. Do you know what I mean? You have a little file, secret file, do you know what I mean, that has a little tab or a post-it attached to it, you know, and you do keep up to date. And you do have, as I said, a community of filmmakers who you'll check in and you'll see what they're working on and whether or not they'd be interested in working with you. We are lucky in that the festival happens at a very exciting time of the year. You know, it's around the time of the Berlinale, it's around just after Sundance, it's just before the Oscars. So in that way, we've kind of carved out our space. So people know that that's when Dublin is going to happen, and they know that that's when they should be talking to us, should be 5-6 months before that. So again, that is about relationships. So in terms of watching films, I would suggest that this year we're doing a retrospective of Sarah Maldoror, this fantastic African filmmaker. And that's the end of a 3-year focus looking at the kind of forgotten or invisible women filmmakers whose work should be far better known, but we just keep sticking on retrospectives to Kubrick and Coppola. But that's a research piece. You know, that's where you're going to archives and you're trying to find the material and find what's available, and then you're kind of including it in the program.
Yeah.
In terms of new work, we open our submissions around April, which is literally a month later. But Cannes is probably the first place you start seeing new work that may actually land in the festival. And from then, it's about 5 months of watching films, either submissions, which come in via our online partner, Film Freeway, or you're actually going to see films in festivals, whether it's Toronto or San Sebastian. And I'm lucky that we've been developing partnerships with lots of different festivals, and we kind of have a reciprocal thing. So we'll kind of suggest some Irish films to them and they'll suggest some to us. So you get to about September and you'll have a good idea maybe about some of the Irish films that you'd be looking at, you know, probably, fingers crossed, what your retrospective or what some of your guests might look like.
Yeah.
And then until pretty much the middle of November, you're watching new work and you're trying to find whether it'll fit. And the criteria is, I mean, the usual one is do you like it? Do you think it has artistic value? You know, and then does it fit into what you're planning? You know, and I'm an early person. I'm an early bird person, so I am going to say this. But if you submit early, you have a better chance. Your programming team is more receptive to new work.
Yeah.
If you do it at the last minute, unfortunately, sometimes it's just too last minute. But having said that, every festival wants to have the best it possibly can. And so as humans, you'll just open, you know, all opportunities and tentacles to hear what's happening. So you can drive a lot of the rest of the team insane by saying, hold on just 1 second, I think we might have another one coming in, you know. And this year's a good example because we've a fantastic lineup of new Irish work, you know, and what's really exciting about that is, you know, that just the festival being able to support them, you know, and again, the fact that cinemas are opening up, we'll be supporting people whose works will be world premiering in Dublin, but will be going on hopefully to other festivals, you know. So part of my job is to try and see what we can support and what works for an Irish audience. And that does mean going to the cinema, and it means being an audience. And I would also say that to Irish filmmakers is go to the festivals as an audience member to the ones that you want to submit to, because it's a really good idea to find out what the texture is, what's different between Dublin and Galway or Dublin and Cork, for instance. And it's important to know that, you know, and to be able to ask for what you want. So, you know, we've a superb film for opening night on Colleen Coon, and I'm delighted because I think that's one of the slots that's very difficult to work out, you know, the kind of gala slots or where you place a film. So it's really nice. This is it. And it's our first Irish language film, which is another development, which is really exciting in Irish cinema.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that because it's based on Claire Keegan's book Foster, which is just an incredible book. If people can novella, if people haven't read it, absolutely go pick it up. And you know, do you think that Irish audiences and your audience for the festival are very open-minded in terms of going to see films that they might never have heard of, that the directors might be unknown to them, that you know might be maybe a risk for them to go see in some sort of way? Like, is there that open-mindedness there, do you think, amongst the community?
I hope so. I mean, I probably would have been slightly more fulsome a couple of years ago because I think that there was more of an appetite. I think that there's a bit of a danger that younger audiences, it's kind of student audiences, are not necessarily going in the same numbers to kind of foreign language films, for instance, or you know, less mainstream, if we want to call it in that way. I do have a worry about the fact that, I mean, I'm really old, so I very clearly remember watching the BBC and the films that they showed in the afternoon of BBC Two, and the sort of films from the 30s and 40s and 50s. And I feel like there has to be a real commitment to foreign language cinema. And it's great what the Lighthouse does and the IFI and obviously Palos. But we need to have a culture of world cinema. And festivals like, you know, this festival are a real opportunity to see it. But I'm just always surprised at how people aren't as curious as I think they go, and they're surprised at how great, for instance, Spanish cinema is, or they didn't understand that, you know, there were all these great filmmakers working in Mexico, for instance, or whatever. And it feels like you know, it's how do we encourage those people to develop them? Because I know people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s are absolutely, you know, avid consumers of kind of cultural cinema, and you see the numbers, but it's to make sure that that next generation come in and that they see them in the cinema. That it's all very well for people to be, very familiar with, whatever Korean cinema or whatever, but we need them to see them in the cinema, and we need them to kind of come, as you said, to kind of take risks, to kind of go outside their comfort zones and see new work. Because I keep seeing a lot of the same faces who've been coming for many, many years, and what I want to see is some new people trying out the kind of offering. Because the shameful side to this is there's some parts of the program that won't be coming back. Wow. It's not Netflix where you can pick it at any time. Once you see it in the festival, it may be that this is the only time you'll see it. And I'm kind of sad that that's the case, but it's an opportunity on another level.
Yeah, and it does put that pressure on you in a good way as a film goer to be like, I better catch this because I don't know if it's going to be picked up or distributed elsewhere here. Do you think that something like, just thinking about the Oscars, because obviously we had the nominations there during the week, do you think something like Parasite, Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, getting the awards kind of on a very mainstream, the most kind of mainstream and well-known film kind of awards level, do you think that award, him getting that, the more of a focus on Korean cinema, will then filter down to people who might not ever normally watch subtitle films? Like, he did have that comment about the 1 inch at the bottom of the screen. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh no, I absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the most annoying things about the pandemic. Don't get me wrong, there are multiple annoying things about the pandemic, but it felt like there was a moment and there was an energy. And I mean, we could even see it, for instance, with Minari. Last year, film. The idea that there are new voices coming through, and Chloe Zhao, and there's new people coming through, and I think it is really interesting and really exciting. And subjects are also incredible subject ranges, what I mean, and styles coming through that you just desperately want, as I said, people to see it. So I mean, I've never had any kind of resistance to watching subtitle films. It just doesn't occur to me. So when I meet people for whom it is a barrier, I immediately want to try and show them some of the films that they're missing out on, and I think, but it's just, it feels sometimes that there is a kind of work to be done that's ongoing. And I'm delighted about Squid Grain, and I'm delighted about Money Heist, and I think that's great. But if that gets more people to think about watching films from different cultures, I think it's really important. Also, I mean, Parasite is an incredible film. So Pedro Almodovar's knocking it out of the park nearly every 1 or 2 years. Paolo Sorrentino. There's some fantastic filmmakers that you're cutting yourself off from if you're purely seeing work in a kind of English language space. Which you really hope people. Also, I keep reminding people, Irish filmmakers are Europeans. We are part of an incredibly proud, incredibly illustrious cinema tradition. And some of the French films we have, some of the Spanish films we have this year are really incredible. There's a Belgian film called Playground. Actually, we have a couple of the ones that I think should have been on that list, to be quite honest. Worst Person in the World.
Oh, I can't wait to see that. Tell us more about that.
It's just fantastic. I mean, there's about 3 films in the festival that have moments where the audience will catch their breath and go. And there's a sequence in Worst Person in the World which is just breathtaking, and we're very lucky that Anders Lai is going to join us, actually, one of the leads. And that's the other side, which I'm really looking forward to. Is last year we didn't have them. I mean, we had lots of guests, but there were guests like this, people in boxes, probably at 8:30 in the morning or something, pretending it's later on. But we've real people coming, and I kind of love that. The idea that film festivals are also where you kind of go, oh my God, you'll never guess who I actually saw. That moment, I don't know if you're allowed to talk about Woody Allen anymore, but when the character walks off the screen, and I think film festivals are very like that. There's that moment where somebody who you've been watching for, an hour and a half suddenly is there telling you how they did it. I think there's something wonderful about that. Or the filmmaker telling you about how they conceived of it in the top of their house or something,
That process, that insight into the process you get is always so fascinating. So tell us a bit more about some of the highlights. I mean, there's a massive program. People could go to diff.ie and buy their tickets in your cool brochure as well, or you can click through and watch the
iBrochure.
iBrochure. Get the wording correct. So have you got some highlights you could tell us about that people might be interested in seeing?
Well, one of the things, I mean, you're talking about lockdown, and I think I made this joke about not doing sourdough or learning a language, but I did decide that we would do a comedy strand. So I'm really
Lovely.
happy we have a great comedy strand, and it ranges, as I said, from an Icelandic sort of cop thriller to a wonderful Spanish film with Javier Bardem called The Good Boss, which is really, really good fun. And I did feel like I wanted to try and have some films that had kind of heart and kind of, you know, a kind of emotional quality. And a lot of those films are actually in our music strand. So we have a really strong, actually interesting kind of focus on Irish traditional music as kind of a thread, I suppose, through some of the films that we have. We have a documentary about Aha that is just a pure nostalgia fest. I mean, you literally will just get stuck. And then talking about sourdough, I don't know where it suddenly started just appearing on the list where we had food films. So we have a wonderful film about Julia Child, which is just a gorgeous documentary about her influence. So if you're a fan of Julia and Julia, but there's a film called Delicieux, which is a French film about the first restaurant in France, which is, you know, like Babette's Feast or one of the great food films. You know, it's just, you just thinking about it now, I'm kind of going, oh, it's around lunchtime. Must be out. And then there's a great Welsh language film called The Feast, which is a kind of supernatural kind of horror, but it's really, really well done. And again, it's one of about, I don't know, I should have totted this up before I talked to you, but I think about 15 or 20 debut features. Wow. You know, and it's an element of the festival where I've noticed this. We have Gaspar Noé's new film, Claire Denis' new film, Francois Ozon, the three, you know, kind of leading lights, I suppose, of French cinema, but also lots of features from, you know, emerging talent from around the world. And I'm always curious about that, because it does feel like that's what a festival should be about. You know, some of it is about being in strands and being kind of, you know, meeting kind of well-known or kind of, you know, familiar, I suppose, actors or directors. But it's also about being there at the start of somebody's journey and going, wow, this is amazing. You know, I can't believe I saw her first film such and such a time, you know, and 20 years ago, I think there were people who, you know, were kind of premiering their first film and kind of quite shy, you know, and then the next time they're back, suddenly they've got publicists, do you know what I mean, and security, and it's all different.
That must be such a lovely thing to see that journey people are going on, you know. And like what I was wondering as well is, I mean, the thing about making a film is it doesn't take 3 months, it can take many, many years for people. So it's kind of hard in one way to spot trends in terms of how the pandemic has affected people, because it has been such a short period of time. But have you seen the pandemic either affecting the amount of things people are making, or is there like a subtext with some sort of pandemic issue coming through? Or do you think it's too early to even know how all of this has affected filmmakers positively or even negatively?
Wow. Big question.
Yeah.
I mean, well, the first thing I'd say is I think we all saw what people were doing last year, because it went straight online. Do you know what I mean? So I think we kind of saw some trends. I think the second thing is that I don't know about you, but I can't watch any films about pandemic issues. Do you know what I mean? Or people being stuck in their house, or films where it's all done from your perspective. Do you know what I mean? I just go, no, a bit too much. Thanks very much. And I do think that there has been, you know, a focus on family, on relationships. I think there's a lot more kind of people have drilled into maybe, you know, a world that they maybe weren't so familiar with, that they're now very, very familiar with. And I think people are working extremely hard. I mean, I know in Ireland, there's about, I don't know, I'm not going to put a figure on it, but there's a lot of production going on. There's a lot of films being made. There's a lot of television being made. So it does feel like everybody is very, very busy, that, you know, once the schedules were slowly, you know, kind of put back in place, that people are working, you know, like that great episode in Call My Agent. Remember where Isabelle Huppert is working at night and during the day on two different films? You know, it does feel like that. And definitely when we've been asking people if they'd like to come or if they're available, you know, they're literally saying, I have a day and I will fly in, do what I need to do and leave. It's that busy. So I think that's kind of interesting. You know, I think you're going to see, and you've already seen it, you know, a lot of familiar names popping up attached to multiple projects, which is really exciting to see, having had that kind of break. The other thing is and this is not meant to sound patronizing at all, but I think you can sense that maybe the break has given people a bit more time to maybe go back to think about, you know, the scripts or a particular part of the process. And you can genuinely see that there's been a kind of rise, I think, from the time that people have had, whether it's an opportunity to do more research or to get more archive material if it's a documentary. But I think particularly some of the documentaries that we have, they're stunning, the amount of materials that they have. And I wonder if that's because of this, as I said, weird space that we were in, you know, where you took away a lot of the other things that would have taken time away from a project, and we're seeing the benefit of it, you know. The other one is just the explosion of talent. You know, we're just seeing Ireland, I think, is slowly evolving into a much more diverse, you know, kind of culture, and we're beginning to show that on screen. And I think that's really exciting. I think maybe the pandemic has accelerated it in a way, but there's so exciting to see the different talents and communities being represented, and individuals coming through. From my point of view, I think that's brilliant, you know, because I'm kind of conscious it was something that you can't fix as a programmer. You have to respond with what's there. But I think it's definitely got better.
And it does feel like diversity, and having a diversity of kind of viewpoints and the people behind the camera, in front of the camera, is a big thing for DIFF, that you have your specific strands, but it always feels like when you're looking at the program, you don't feel like this is just one type of person that I'm seeing represented here. I'm presuming as your job as a programmer, that's really at the forefront for you with all of that.
Well, I think so. I mean, I'm kind of lucky, as I said, that I didn't have that barrier towards subtitles or languages. So I'm quite lucky about that. I mean, I'm very bad at languages, but I quite like reading. Do you know what I mean? Sort of like subtitles. But I was also conscious, and I mean, I do want to mention, I suppose, Michael Dwyer and David McLaughlin, who set up the festival in 2003, because the first Dublin Film Festival was kind of my, you know, education. And I sat in the old screen cinema on the floor, and I watched all these fantastic films from China and from around the world. And I do think that you go to film festivals for different reasons and to see different kinds of films. And it is something that I think is really important. You know, I've been with the festival, as you said, since 2008. You know, I've grown and learned things in that time, you know, and I would always see that you go and try and discover more. And I think it is interesting that that a festival like Dublin is really broad, and that people can hopefully find something that interests them, whether it's, you know, a niche sport or a particular national cinema or a particular subject, that there is something there, you know, within certain limits of whatever 100 films that will appeal to different audiences, and that they will come back, and that they'll grow and maybe try something new. But I think it is really important, because, as I said, you know, it's an area, you know, world cinema, cultural cinema, we don't see as much as they would see, for instance, in London, or that they would see in Paris or New York. So I think there is, you know, there is a need, I think, to keep trying to encourage audiences to come and see work, and to then build it out, you know. And you know, I was delighted to see that an organization like MUBI, for instance, what's called community exploded. Do you know what I mean? Because there was this appetite to see cultural cinema and to see cinema of the past. And that's really, really important. And I suppose that's where I'd see the festival sitting, you know, is it within that space? It's an opportunity, it's an introduction or a portal, you know. But you know, after the festival's over, you will have to do a certain amount of work on your own, you know, to kind of continue that education. Because it's not brought to you in the same way as it possibly is in other places.
Yeah, that you can get inspired, hopefully, and do your own digging, which is always really fun. And so, looking to the future, then, do you have specific things in mind, you know, in the long term that you'd like to see the festival achieving or doing that right now might seem, oh, that's going to be difficult, or oh, that'll be exciting? Yeah, tell me about like your thoughts on the future for the festival.
Wow. I mean,
spill the beans about any plans we can expect.
Spill the beans.
I know.
I mean, I think it is interesting that, you know, I've really enjoyed, I suppose, you know, kind of like looking at where the festival is in 20 years. And I think there's things that, you know, we're always talking about. I kind of have a real sense of wanting to, you know, kind of build out our focus on screenwriters, for instance. I feel like that's an area that, you know, we constantly have to try and recognize, is that without screenwriters, you know, feature films have a lot, you know, of problems, you know, but that unless you have somebody who sits down and starts typing or writing or whatever like that, that's where they come from. I you know, would love to have the Savoy one kind of cinema space. We're very lucky working with Cineworld, but I really do miss the Savoy. And I feel like that's a really important aspect to to a festival, you know, and putting on those kind of screenings. And I'd love to kind of go back to some of the events that we did. We did some fantastic events down the board, gosh. And again, it's about a particular kind of guest coming in and kind of coming to the festival, you know, and that you'd hope that you'd get back to. And then the other side to it is being able to kind of develop our kind of regional tours and bringing the program out. You know, we have this, as I said, kind of window at the beginning of the year, and you're constantly trying to find ways of kind of expanding that. Online, to be honest, Eva, I don't know. I'm fascinated to see how we do this year and to see whether it becomes something that we, you know, stay and build with, or whether it is something that we all just did, you know, for a couple of years and then we go back to the old ways, you know. And it's very 50-50. I'm talking to lots of different people, and some people are saying, nope, that's it. We're never going back online again. And other people are saying it's here to stay, you know.
Yeah, it is going to be really interesting, because I think the accessibility aspect of it is great, but at the same time, you also, alongside that, it's great to have people in the cinema. So it's trying to balance that for you. It's going to be an interesting time to see how people do respond. So my last question is just, you've been in the film business for a good number of years. So you obviously really love and adore cinema and film. Like, why do you love film and cinema? What does it bring to your life that you're so passionate about it, that you've dedicated your life to it, really?
Oh my God, I hadn't actually expected that question. Okay.
Didn't tell you I was going to be asking that one.
Do you know what I would say? It makes me feel good. I that was the one thing I really missed. And it does sort of harken back to those great sort of Preston Sturges films or whatever, do you know what I mean? But that moment where, you know, an audience is in one place and something happens. And I do believe that. I do actually believe that I can go to see something and it will change the way I feel about it, about myself, about, you know, the world outside. So I kind of love that. And there was something that it was actually Michael Dwyer said, that he is still filled with vast amounts of kind of expectation and curiosity when the lights go down. And I think that's true. I think there's something about that there's a moment when the trailers stop and, you know, you suddenly, the darkness fills the space and you suddenly go, oh my God, what's it going to be? You know, and that could be anything. It could be, you know, a very small, intimate story about a little boy crossing a desert, or it could be this huge, big, you know, sort of like romantic comedy. But suddenly you're just in that story. And I love that immersive quality of the cinema, you know, and it's maybe why I'm slightly resistant to the online side, because I don't get as immersed in it, you know. And I love the feeling where you forget time and you forget your phone, as you mentioned before, and you literally are just in this world, and you cry and you laugh because that's what is appropriate to what's happening to the person or story on screen. And then you come out and suddenly it's like, oh my God, you're blinking, you know, like somebody back into the light. It's like dreams, you know. So I that's why I like going to the cinema. That idea of maybe being transported or distracted, whatever way you want to describe it, you know. I also think it's an art form. I think it's an art form that is my favorite art form, because I think it's really, really hard to do well, but when it is done well, it's unlike any other. And I think that's something that, you know, there's some films that you go back and see and you just cannot work how they manage to do it. You know, they don't reveal their secrets, and it doesn't matter what you do. You just go, how do they know what to do and how to spin that and make you feel that at that particular time? You know, and I know we row about what that is all the time. Is it Citizen Kane? Is it Vertigo? Is it Tokyo Story? Which one? But I really do think there are masters. You know, there are filmmakers who are just genius, you know, and no matter how many events we do and workshops and panels and evaluations, we cannot work out how they do it, you know. So that's probably why I like it, why I love cinema.
It's that glorious mystery, and it's nice to have that mystery of creation and art in there. Thanks so much, Grainne Humphreys. People can go to diff.ie to pick up their tickets, look at the iBrochure, which is really interesting brochure, like I said, well worth checking out. Loads of stuff happening. We'll be covering a load of it as well on the journal.ie, so do stay tuned. Delighted to be one of the sponsors again this year. Always a highlight of my year to be working on this. So the Virgin Media Dublin International Film Festival kicks off on the 23rd of February, so not too long now. So we let you get back to the work you're no doubt doing, getting ready for that. But thanks so much again, Gráinne. Thanks to the audience for joining us as well, for giving us some of your lunch break, for hearing the fascinating tales there that Gráinne is telling us by putting a festival together. Take care.
Thanks.